Hello and welcome to the channel. So if you guys don't know, I do a lot of gaming content, and I tried doing some reaction content a little bit ago on my other channel. But today, actually, we're going to be doing some reaction content. This new channel, this Katze is actually meant for both history reaction content and hopefully some original stuff I'm going to upload soon. I've got something on the Victorian era that I'm actually working on right now, one of my favorite historic eras. Also love Victoria 3. Might do a gaming video on that too later. So this is going to be a reaction to Extra History's The Seminal Tragedy. They're one of my favorite history channels. Hope you guys enjoy as well. And if you guys haven't given them a subscribe or taken a look at them, they're awesome. I hope you do. This is Seminal Tragedy. It's not about World War One itself. It's about before. And full disclosure, I have actually seen this before, but it has been a while. And I did it on purpose so that I would have not a new reaction, but you get more from me basically out of that. So it's been a minute. But it's one of my favorites, so I did want to react to it, even though I have seen it before. But it is great. All right, well, I guess we'll get into it.
Human history is equal parts heroism, tragedy, and misunderstanding. Very rarely have we displayed all three to such a degree as in the First World War. This war is called the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century, because without it there is no Stalin and no Hitler, no fascism or World War II. Without it, we don't have a Cold War that leads us to the very brink of annihilation, nor do we see the Middle East carved up by old men still
Yeah, so different. The world would be just... I don't think we can grasp how different the world would be. Nothing would be the same without World War One.
from 4 years of meaningless self-inflicted catastrophe. Without this war, we probably don't have 9/11 or the turmoil in the Middle East today. This war ushered in the modern age, born in a crucible of gunpowder and toxic smoke and the blood.
For better or worse, right? Because, while it brought in the modern age, it also brought in... Well, so a lot of the reasons it's so important is because it can be led to, the First World War basically caused the Second. So, pretty much all the dominoes all fell. So it's while I say, oh, we might not have... While they're saying, they might not have 9/11 and stuff, might sound a little strange, right? It's true. It's really true, because we may not have had World War II. We might not have invented the nuclear bomb, which means no Cold War. We might not have had any crisis in the Middle East. Well, we still would have had some, but not as many as today. We still probably have a Middle East that was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. I know they were the sick man of Europe, but they weren't out of it yet. They were not out of it until World War One crushed them. It's just... there's just so much we might have, and well, for better or worse too. Not all of these things are good. So,
Blood of 10 million men, blood spilt in war for...
it's debatable whether or not you wanted the Ottomans or the Austro-Hungarians to continue existing. It's not that inherently they were bad, but their governments weren't exactly great. Like World War One, Armenian genocide. Ottomans, it's not, it's like Austria-Hungary, a lot of the Balkan states did want to be free, and, it's arguable that they did deserve to be, but, and this is when that happens, so.
From the fields of France to the waters off America, from the Russian frontier to the sands of the Middle East, from the Chinese mainland to the deepest parts of the sea. This war broke empires. It shattered the past and forced us to give up our last ties to our medieval understanding. When the smoke cleared and a stunned world climbed out of its trenches, we lived in a new age, with new powers, new ideas, and new terrors. It is the defining event of the 20th century.
Yeah.
It is the Great War. But it's not the war itself that we're here to talk about today. Hopefully, over the course of this show, a bit at a time, we'll slowly, story by story, cover the sprawling events of this turning point in history. But today we are focused on the events that led to this war. For if the war itself is the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century, then the weeks before the war are its seminal tragedy. In these next few episodes, we'll focus on the very human, very personal stories that led Europe to consume itself, to ignite itself in one suicidal blaze from which it still hasn't recovered, because it is a tragedy of the highest order. It's like a play, a Greek epic, a story so grand we would think it must be fiction.
There is one thing I want to say, because they said there about that Europe still hasn't recovered from. I would like to actually make kind of this is an opinionated statement a little bit. Well, no, it's very opinionated. But, so, I know, in a way it hasn't recovered, and imperialism made Europe really powerful. But honestly, I kind of think, and this is opinion, of course, I really just think the world caught up because Europe got the upper hand technologically. They got it via the Industrial Revolution. Um, and there's a lot of factors for that. It was not, oh, because Europe's special. A lot of it was luck, some of it was location, a decent bit of it was location, and then some of it was just geography, which is most of it was geography, honestly. But I really just think that because when industrialization began, right, gave Europe the big leg up. But in the end, it, how best to explain this? I don't know if you've seen. There's actually a different. I think it's extra history. Actually, they say Japan in World War II, Japan makes lots of victories and speed out of speed. Their victories were based on speed, but then power caught up with them. That's kind of what I think Europe would happen to Europe. They sped through the tech tree really fast. But at the end of the day, Europe is small, right? And the powers like China and Asia, America and in the North America, um, and like I know Russia is Europe, but Europe slash Asia slash Mideast, they big. Um, but like I think that amount of land and that overall that like power caught up with Europe. They sped through the tech tree, got really powerful, but at the end of the day, they're small. They don't have enough resources. They just don't have as many people. And at the end of the day, larger nations are catching up. And that's basically what I think it is. I think Europe got lucky, basically. That's basically what I think. Europe got lucky, and now they're falling behind. Now, World War One, I know that was a tangent, but World War One 100% sped that up. World War Two sped it up even more. This probably they would have continued to have the leg up for a lot longer. But eventually, I think Europe was going to fall anyway. It's not that they're falling now either. Europe is still powerful. It's just nowhere near. I think they're being equalized a bit more to what they really should be, not as much of the leg up that they had before.
If the scars of the war couldn't still be seen on the fields of France. It's Shakespeare living out before us. It begins with the death of a prince and his lady, and ends in mass slaughter the likes of which the world has never seen. So let's set the stage. For 100 years, Europe has been at peace. There have been wars, sure, but they were minor wars.
If I remember correctly, the Metternich system, like the balance of power, basically.
Wars on the periphery. Wars without many of the great powers involved. Not since Napoleon did the great states of Europe vie in bloody battle. For after the ravages of the Napoleonic Wars, the statesmen of Europe had come together to try to stop such a catastrophe from ever happening again. They created a system called the Concert of Europe, so that whenever war seemed perilously close, the nations of Europe would come together in a conference, and instead come to a settlement that all parties would abide by. But Europe has changed since those weary of the Napoleonic conflicts first came together to create the Great Concert. The first and most major change was the formation of Germany. At the time our story begins, it's important to remember Germany as a nation was only 40 years old. It's a young nation, a strong one, a nation looking to claim its own. But to say that Germany was a strong nation is to undersell the magnitude of its creation.
Yeah.
I mean to say that the birth of Germany was something perhaps unique in the history of the world. For overnight, with the signing of a few papers, the middle of Europe was transformed from 1,000 tiny squabbling states to the greatest land power the world had ever known.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, right? So Germany was a ton of little states. It wasn't Germany yet, of course. It was the Holy Roman Empire. Well, then it got destroyed after Napoleon went in. But if you think about it, right, all those little nations develop on their own. Those little tiny states are developing, right? Well, they're able to focus more. And I'm not saying this always happened, but they're able to focus more on their individual territories, what they need to do to prosper. And then they all come together, and well, they're all kind of powerful, right? They're not powerful enough without being together, of course, without, unifying, but they're all very powerful because they've all been able to focus on themselves individually. At least that's my thought, right? And, this actually, I feel like this is a fairly, okay, again, opinionated, but to me, I think this is a fairly common thing, right? Because Japan is one of them. Japan unifies. Japan was the same thing. It was a splintering of states. Unified, they're extremely strong. Countries that unify usually seem to be really strong, right? Federations or groups of nations that become empire. They seem to be really strong. America is an example. Japan is an example. China is an example. China's been splintered all throughout its history. Um, Russia's ish. I'm gonna go ish on that one. The UK is an example, great example. Wales, Scotland, Ireland, well, Northern Ireland, well, throughout its history differently. England, like, and granted, I'm not saying all of these were, like consenting agreement of these states to come together. Some of it was done via warfare. Well, a lot of it was. But whenever nations seem to come together, it does seem to produce like stronger powers, basically.
One night,
Whenever they
suddenly the
fold.
most powerful nations of Europe, Russia, France, Austria-Hungary, and England, were not the most powerful nations in Europe any longer. Overnight, in the very heart of Europe, had been created a nation with more manpower, natural resources, and economic strength than any other nation in the world except perhaps for Great Britain. Moreover, this creation was cemented in the defeat of France, which at the time was considered the strongest land power in Europe. And at the time of our story, that defeat and its memory still run deep. And now look at the world from the perspective of that powerful new German
Right.
nation. Here they are, arguably the most powerful country in the world, and yet
But
they
they're
see
young.
themselves being denied all the rights of a
Yep.
great world power. Britain and France held territories across the globe. Even the Netherlands, a nation which the might of the new Germany could wipe off the face of the earth in a week.
And that's probably on purpose. Like, they don't want to give them this power because they already have all these resources. They have this manpower. They are powerful. They don't want them to get more powerful. That's dangerous. Right? They don't want them to get benefits that the other great powers are having because they're already dangerous without them.
Had colonies from Asia all the way to
And
Africa.
it breaks
But
to some
Germany, for
degree.
all of their strength, had been denied those possessions simply because their nation was young. Imagine what this does to the balance of power. Imagine
Yeah.
what this does to the geopolitical scene. Think what would happen today if, say, the entire EU declared themselves a single nation with a single economy, a single military, and a
Yeah.
single foreign policy. Imagine if they
Pretty
said that
powerful.
they wanted greater access to Middle Eastern oil, and Russia and the United States said, no, we were here first. Imagine now if representatives from Russia and the United States smiled and told this young nation that they'd be happy to continue to sell them oil at an inflated price, though. This was the
Yeah.
position Germany found itself in. How was the concert of Europe, a system built around a balance of power and compromise,
Supposed
to
to
last
survive.
in these circumstances? And yet, for 40 years, it did. And this brings us to
Surprisingly,
the
it did
second major
eventually break
change
though.
since the Napoleonic Wars: the men. The 70 years after those wars was a time of giants, men who towered over the world stage. Time and again here, Europe rolled well on the dice of history and came up with leaders who were capable of navigating an increasingly complex and increasingly modern geopolitical world. In the 1800s, Russians saw men like Alexander II, who understood that Russia needed to modernize to survive. He began dismantling serfdom, reformed judicial practices, encouraged universities, and pursued peace, understanding that Russia was in no position to fight the major European powers. Like all the men here, this guy was not all chuckles and sunshine. Alexander II brutally suppressed revolutionaries and separatists in the territories
Nothing said these men were good. It just meant they were skilled, basically.
Russia controlled. Still, he was effective, without question.
Yeah.
By 1900, we have in Russia Nicholas II, a deeply reactionary, deeply conservative man who history records as being of middling intellect, with neither the training nor the inclination to properly rule. His reign is a catalogue of embarrassing mismanagement. This is the man who fell under the sway of the mystic Rasputin.
This is why we have the Soviets come into the picture during the war.
This is a man who couldn't even coordinate his own coronation. A man who let 1,300 people die in a human stampede on the day he was crowned because,
I
I kid you not, there was not enough beer and pretzels. And this
yes, I don't want to. I don't consider myself an expert on Russia in general, but I don't want to put that entirely on him. Um, I don't know. I just what he did afterward. 100%. He went partying with the French, almost literally. Basically literally. But I don't want to put that in, I feel like it's right to put entirely on him. The Stampede. I think they do a video on it later too. Maybe I'll react to that later. But I don't want to put that entirely on him. The Stampede. I mean, Russia was in a really bad state. And yeah, peasants were starving. Is that the monarchy's fault? Yes. Is that specific monarch's fault? Is that specifically his fault? I'm hesitant to put all that blame on him.
This is the man who held a ball that day anyway, because, hey, why let a few hundred deaths
That's the
spoil your
problem.
day?
That
And
would
this
be
is the
problem.
man who will, in the end, hold the fate of the world in his hands. And
yeah, the ball afterward is 100% his fault. I can't defend him for that.
by this point in Austria, we have as emperor an 84-year-old man, 2 years away from his death and battered by the weight of the life he's led. His foreign minister, Berthold, is neither a bad man nor a stupid man, but he is a weak and vacillating man at a time when European politics are all about strength. And Germany? Germany, during the 20 years following its creation, had unquestionably one of the greatest diplomats the world has ever seen, Otto von Bismarck. This is a man of great ability and great appetites, a man known to smoke 3 cigars at once and down a bottle of champagne at breakfast, a man who probably deserves an entire episode just to himself, but for our purposes, he is the man who held the concert of Europe together under the incredible strain of the creation of the new German state. His life's work was to ensure that France and Russia never allied, so that Germany would never be surrounded.
We know that doesn't happen.
This was his nightmare, his greatest fear. And in this, like in many things, he turned out to be right. He famously said that the great European conflagration would come from some damn fool thing in the Balkans, and he warned Kaiser Wilhelm II that within 20 years, his bellicose policies would destroy the Kaiserreich. And he was correct almost to the day. But he was fired by Kaiser Wilhelm II, who has too much historical baggage to get an accurate view of. Suffice it to say that the Kaiser often ends up with a reputation for feeling inadequate. Having been born with a withered arm and grown up hounded by his mother, he came to believe that he had to prove he was masculine, and so set out to break with Bismarck's policies and show that he was his own man by abandoning the German alliance with Russia and moving Germany towards a much more expansionist stance. He was known for being brash and impulsive, with little tact, crumbling the carefully balanced alliances that had for so long kept the concert of Europe in place. Now to all this, we have to add one last piece to the stage.
Missing piece.
Fear. The fear of the dying empires.
Yeah.
The fear of those once great nations that now so clearly saw the shadow of death approaching them from behind.
Russia,
the Ottoman Empire,
and the Ottomans.
the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire.
Yeah.
The Ottoman Empire was long known as the sick man of Europe. Its decline had been long and slow, with the surrounding nations taking bites out of its carcass as it slowly died. The Austro-Hungarian Empire looked at the fate of the Ottomans and saw shadows of what was to come.
Yeah.
They feared they'd be like the Ottomans, dismantled, taken apart piece by piece until they were...
Problem is, the fear exacerbated it. Like, the fear of them collapsing led them to be a little more brash decision-making, basically. So, like, they were more willing to jump into war for the glory, for the land, for the prosperity, hopefully, afterward. And it really just, it basically sped it up.
Were too weak to fight back. They had once been the most powerful state in Europe, but they ruled over many nations and many peoples, and over the 19th century those peoples had asserted themselves, crying out for their own nations, crying out to be free, to, as people, decide their own fate. And so, through the 19th century, the Austro-Hungarian Empire saw its territory chipped away, as the other great nations of the concert of Europe ruled in their conferences that those people had a right to be free. And with each loss, those peoples that the Austro-Hungarian Empire still maintained control of agitated for their own freedom to a greater and greater extent, causing unrest that rocked the empire to its very core. And lastly, we have the Russians. The Russian Tsars ruled the largest country in the world, but, like the Ottomans, their military, economy, and infrastructure were woefully behind the times. And in 1905...
Yeah, and Russia was so underdeveloped. Europe was getting rid of feudalism, right? Russia hadn't finished that. It hadn't really industrialized. I mean, it had started. I'm not going to say it hadn't at all. But, and part of that is really just that it's too big. It's just way too big.
When the Russians lost a war with the Japanese, the first time a European power had lost a war to a nation won in modern history, their weakness became eminently clear to the world. This loss caused a revolution that forced the Tsar to accept a parliament and a constitutional monarchy. But it wasn't in the nature of Alexander II to accept a parliament, and he rebelled against these constraints, leaving his country precariously perched on the verge of revolution. So with a new superpower in the midst of Europe, fear driving crumbling empires to irrational and desperate decisions, and a group of leaders simply not equal to their forebearers at the task of guiding the ships of state, The players are all in place. The stage is set, and the curtain begins to rise on the war to end all wars. Join us next time for an improbable assassination, the death of a prince, and a sandwich which changed history.
Part 2.
Alright, the stage is set. Now let's put the players in their places. The curtain opens on the back of a rundown cafe in Belgrade. A young man comes in carrying a package and takes a seat at a table with a handful of other young men huddled around. They still to a hush as he opens the package. Inside is a single piece of paper, a newspaper clipping. The one who brought the package bends over to stare at the page. One of the other young men slides a candle across the table so he can better see. Before him, circled in red, is a headline, and it reads, Archduke Franz Ferdinand to visit Sarajevo. Now we skip ahead a few weeks. We're outside a palace. A resplendently dressed man and woman are getting in an open-top car, 100 years ago this year. He's dressed in bright, blazing blue. His chest is full of medals. On his head, a grand horsehair cap. She is wearing a flowing white dress and laughing. He helps her into the car. This is Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, next in line for succession to the throne, accompanied by his wife Sophie. They've come to Sarajevo to watch military maneuvers, but really that's an excuse. It's their anniversary. Yeah. They've come to get away from the stifling courts of Austria.
And they actually couldn't do as much together at home because I believe she was a lower social class standing or whatever than he was. So technically their marriage wasn't viewed very favorably.
Austria, where the Archduke's marriage to Sophie will never be accepted due to her low birth. She was, after all, only a countess. But things have been really tense in this part of the empire. The Serbian agitators have been acting with increased boldness to demand a Serbia free and independent from Austrian rule. And this day, of all days, falls on the anniversary of one of the greatest battles in Serbian history, the Battle of Kosovo. It's one of the great rallying points of the Serbian people, a point of national pride. To Serbian nationalists, this is one of their proudest days. And to them, for the Archduke of Austria, the symbol of their oppression, the embodiment of foreign rule, to come here on that day was the greatest insult. Now, perhaps the Archduke had chosen that day to show solidarity, to ease tensions, to make the people of Serbia understand that he cared about their traditions. Maybe he simply didn't know that the day had any special importance, and he was just there to get away. But whatever the reason, he was ill-informed. For on any other day, the events that are about to play out may not have happened. On any other day, this might have turned out simply to be your average parade, an event which wouldn't even go down as
a lot of this, seems like it's inevitable. Like, it was always going to happen. The one thing about that is there's the fact that it had happened. So, whether or not it always would have happened or not, either way it did. So, it's kind of like that. But also, if you think about it, there's the other idea that, this was going to happen regardless. And it really was just waiting for an excuse. And this was it. And that's the thing. Europe was on the brink. Something was going to happen. The concert of Europe was being pushed to its limit, and there were no more, competent people that were keeping it together well. So it probably would have occurred anyway. It occurred a little faster, though, due to this.
Historical footnote in a long and prosperous rule. But something had to happen on this day. It was too symbolic, too important, too grand of a story. And so the first domino is placed in the mad and improbable events of this 28th day of June 1914. So here now, in the sleek black car, the royal couple begins to process down the streets of Sarajevo, flanked by 5 other cars filled with officials and guards. It's a parade. The streets are lined with onlookers, the route has been published, the world knows exactly where the Archduke is going to be. And those young men from that cafe in Belgrade are there in that crowd. They are nationalists. They're patriots. They're assassins and terrorists. They call themselves Young Serbia, and are part of the much more ominously named Black Hand. And they are angry. Angry in the way that only young men can be. And when I say young, I mean that barely any of them had reached the age of 20. They had in them an anger born of ideals, or they had ideals to rationalize their anger. A boldness born of a cause, or a cause to justify the brash kind of risk-taking that truly borders madness. But
actually, this is a lot of what I think with, when you have nationalists and just people, rebels, rebellions, all those people, there are people with both. There are people that have the ideals first, and then they're willing to act on them. And then there's people that join the cause that just want to act on them. They don't really care about the actual, like, cause. They want to get violent. And that some people are like that. If you remember correctly, like Stalin, for instance, in Russia is one of those. He's the, what's it called? The gangster, basically, I guess, of the Russian Revolution.
However you view them, here they were, hidden in the crowd, intent on killing the Archduke.
Yeah.
One by one, the Archduke's car passes his would-be assassins. Nothing happens. No attempt on his life. 2 of his assassins ended up succumbing to fear and couldn't go through with the deed. One felt pity for his wife sitting in the car and just couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. Another one had an equipment malfunction. And so, one by one, Ferdinand passed them, none the wiser, smiling and waving to the crowd. Smiling and waving in an open-topped car so the world could better see. But at last, on the Commercia Bridge, an assassin finally steps forward and throws a bomb at the Archduke's car. Seconds before it lands, Ferdinand sees it and dives behind the door of the car as the bomb passes over him and bounces into the street behind. An explosion rips through the ground, mangling the car following them and leaving 20 people wounded and bleeding on the street. The assassin leaps over the side of the bridge to make his escape, but in the type of amateurish planning that would be comical if the circumstances weren't so grave, he fails to realize that the river below is only 4 inches deep, and he hurts his leg in the fall. In one last act of comic tragic bravado, the assassin swallows the cyanide pill he's been carrying, a final "you'll never take me alive" gesture, but alas, these young high school assassins had bought their suicide pills on the cheap, and this one was way past its shelf life. So the young man just sits quietly vomiting into the river while the police stroll down to take him very much alive. The motorcade races back the way it came, sirens screaming, and the city begins to lock down. Another of the young men, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, watches the cars go by, heart sinking.
Yep.
So it's done, he thinks to himself. It's off. The Archduke is alive. The assassination's failed. He is pretty bummed out. His hopes to be immortalized in the halls of Serbian heroes are dashed. All his dreams of glory just shattered. Overall, it's been a pretty lousy day. So he goes off to pout, thinking maybe a snack will make me feel better. This one young man's comfort snack may seem like a small thing, but it's on the small things that history often turns.
But yeah, there's
Back at City Hall, the Archduke and the mayor are having words. The mayor proposes that the Archduke and Duchess should continue on their trip, but the Archduke thunders back something like, "Are you crazy? You'd have us visit museums while bombs explode on your streets?" And then, in a gesture of gallantry that you don't often see anymore, he proposes instead that they immediately visit the hospital where the wounded were taken after the attack. So they don't hide him in a bunker or spirit him out of the country with a small army of guards like we would do today. Instead, they all pile out to the motorcade and start off towards the hospital. But nobody remembers to tell Franz Ferdinand.
Well, unfortunately, this is probably why you don't see this kind of gallantry today, but you should. But this is probably why, because it doesn't always end well.
Driver, and I should mention that this is the Archduke's personal chauffeur. This fellow came along with the Archduke for the trip, but he's Austrian through and through. This guy does not know his way around Sarajevo. And so, as they're making their way through the city, the Archduke's driver makes a wrong turn onto Franz Josef Street, a street named for the Archduke's father. Meanwhile, our failed assassin, Gavrilo Princip, is sitting outside a deli, eating his consolation snack and starting to feel maybe a little better. And maybe this won't be his only chance, he thinks. Maybe someday he'll have another shot at greatness. I mean, it was a really bad day, but who knows, it could still turn out okay. He'd have to go into hiding for a while, but Holy shit, is that the Archduke? Yes, right there in front of him, in the same open-topped car, was the Archduke and his wife. The driver had taken a random wrong turn onto the street where Gavrilo Princip was having a sandwich, and their car had just stalled out trying to back up. 3 strides away. Gavrilo can hear the Archduke and his wife talking from the car. No words, just actions.
And his decision is gonna start a war.
He stands up, he pulls out his pistol, and he fires 2 shots that change the world. The Archduke looks over, barely noticing the gendarmes wrestling the young man by the car to the ground. His only sight is for his wife, lying quietly on the floor of the car. He reaches out with a hand weak and heavy. Something's wrong with his neck, he can't quite think straight. He sees her and he utters one last wish. "Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Live for our children." A man leans over him and asks if he's badly hurt, and he thinks he says, "It's nothing. It's nothing." He repeats the phrase, each time a little more quietly, and neither of them live through the hour. And so, our first act is done. A martyred prince and princess, or the death of oppressors. An act of terror or a heroic strike for freedom. An act that relied on 1,000 coincidences. On a poorly chosen date, on a change of plans, on a misinformed driver, and on a sad young man having a sandwich. But no matter how you look at it, it was an act that began the greatest war in history and brought to an end the world that all of these actors knew. This war would change the world. Join us next time and find out how the world responds to this event.
I mean, yeah, it really does seem like, I mean, it is a bunch of coincidences, but it seems so impossible looking back, but it happened. Like, that's the thing. Like, if it hadn't happened, there may have been a bunch of other coincidental times that almost led to something happening, but didn't, you know? And this one did. And that's why it seems so improbable and so crazy. And my goodness, it happened because it did. There may have been other chances where it didn't, or other times when a World War One or a type of or a large scale European war could have come into place. I mean, granted, all within relatively same time period, but anyway, that's episodes 1 and 2. I'll get to episodes 3 and 4. I think it's 3 and 4. Next time. Thank you all for watching. See ya.